second and final day of the Presidential Summit on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide, which is underway in Midrand, that's in the north of Johannesburg. This is the second summit since 2018. It was launched in response to protests against GBV. Now, the theme for this year is accountability, acceleration and amplification now. Newzroom Afrika's Zikhona Tshona is at the event and she joins us live now. Zikhona, good morning to you. Yesterday, the victims of gender-based violence talking directly to the president, and they have spelled out what their demands are, and that is to fund the initiative so that gender-based violence can be stemmed in this country. What's likely to happen on the second and final day?
Certainly, Oli, that conversation continues today. Yesterday, there was a lot of talk from civil society groups about government's absence in the fight against gender-based violence. Civil society is saying there is no financial support or accountability from government. They feel as though they are spearheading the fight against gender-based violence on their own. In fact, yesterday, we had the president in his address admitting that government needs to pull up its socks and take this issue seriously, saying it's certainly not giving it the priority or the agency that it does deserve. Currently underway is in fact a conversation between civil society, government as well as the private sector on accountability. Civil society saying that government and the private sector are failing victims of gender-based violence, particularly when it comes to funding people that are doing the work on the ground and interacting with victims and survivors daily. They're saying there's simply no funding coming from government as well as the private sector. And I actually just caught some comments coming out of that conversation from a private sector representative who agreed that they are absent as private sector, and these are the employees that are affected by gender-based violence. But also yesterday, there was a presentation by the Medical Research Council on the femicide issue. We know that this is a big problem in South Africa. The fact that this summit existed is a result of the high rate of femicide in this country. The Medical Research Council was giving out their numbers yesterday in terms of decreases and increases in with this problem in this country. Intimate partner killings are still a huge problem. So people are not safe anywhere at home, at work, or even in the streets in South Africa. But to talk to me more about the Medical Research Council's research, particularly in relation to gender-based violence and femicide, is Dr. Nwabisa Jamashayi from the Medical Research Council. Out of yesterday, civil society really saying that there's no activism coming from government with regards to fighting gender-based violence. What is your view?
My view is that government really needs to step up. We need to see government committing to programs for violence prevention, particularly gender-based violence programs. In 2018 at the summit, the president opened acknowledging that there are homegrown programs for GBV prevention in the country. Those need to be implemented. The type of funding that we get for NGOs and other community-based organizations is not adequate to create the kind of dent that we need to ensure organizations are funded and given support in a sustainable way to do the prevention work that needs to happen in the country. It's not only preventing the violence before it happens, but it also is about supporting and ensuring healing and accountability at the same time. So that's what we need focused on right now.
Yesterday, your presentation was on the numbers of femicide in this country. You've noted a decline since 1999, but the floor was not really agreeing with that. Why are we not seeing this playing out on the ground?
Well, I think it's a misunderstanding that we have around the data. So something needs to happen with the police data. If you saw, there is a bit of a misunderstanding about how to calculate population level data using the data management systems that we get from the police, for instance. So we need to make sure that there is a systematic way in which that helps us to understand why we see such high levels of femicide, and particularly indicating that there is this decrease, and yet the police data is showing us something else. But I think there's also a turn since since the 2017 data that we collected in South Africa, where there seems to be a trend that shows us that we're actually going backward. But what we're looking at in the research at the MRC is research looking over the past 18 years. So the decline is steady in comparison with the kind and the size of the population increase in the female population in South Africa, which is 36% since 1999. That's why we're seeing that decrease, right? But now we need to understand, since 2017, what is the police data saying? And we're going to be able to make some comparisons with the next coming femicide study, looking at the year of COVID 2020 to see perhaps what may have shifted since 2017.
As researchers, are you finding challenges with accessing police data? Is that part of your challenge?
Well, police data is accessible. The challenge is usually around understanding what happened with each individual case. The statistics that Naima Midrand showed yesterday, the research shows that the investigation per case of femicide that we were able to access through the research, which combines the police records as well as the mortuary records for femicide research, right? We found that there's actually lower investigation and understanding, in particular, of the history that links intimate partner violence to each a killing that we find in the documents.
Today is the final day of the summit, not another talk show, we hope. What are you hoping will come out from today to take us forward in the fight against gender-based violence?
I'm hoping that government will hear that we need more funding. We need funding that's going to be sustainable for gender-based violence prevention work. I am hoping that the stats that we have been able to garner and try and understand from both police and the research that's happening in the country, we are going to make sure that we create a better story that's going to be understandable for everyone who is an actor in this space, and we're all going to start doing our work. But my biggest hope is that gender-based violence prevention work is going to start happening from now, and the funds are going to kick in. Private sector playing part, government playing part.
Thank you so much. That's Dr. Nobisa Jamashai from the Medical Research Council, calling on both government and the private sector to start funding activism work with regards to fighting gender-based violence. So a big call for funding from civil society here at the Presidential Summit.
Tshona, thank you very much for that update live for us at that GBV Summit.